Awesome.
All right, that was it. That was all.
That's it. That's all we got.
That's it.
Oh man.
We need
The rest of the
more.
guitar is not in tune because my daughter got a hold of it. So we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
How about we do it next time, Brian? We will have a live show.
Sounds good.
You actually haven't joined the Trino Delta Lake office hours. What you've actually joined is the Brian play guitar office hours.
Yeah, sounds good.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is an amazing start to the Delta Lake office hours. So how about, if you are tuning in, feel free to join through our LinkedIn page, YouTube page, and ask your questions away. Or, just to start with, please say where you're from, say hi to us. We love seeing where people are joining from. So for those who are new to this session, these sessions are live and occur every 2 weeks on Thursdays at 9 a.m. Because of some schedule, we had to do it 8:30 a.m. today. So we bring panel for contributors and champions of Delta Lake to answer your questions live on LinkedIn and YouTube. So please ask away your questions about open source community, Trino community, Delta Lake community, and we are happy to answer those questions for you. So a mini recap from our last session, we had Scott, Fabian, and Denny, who provided amazing insights on our recent release of Delta Lake 1.2. So we talked about column generation, data skipping, optimize, Delta Flink sync connector, and we also touched on a few upcoming features like Z-ordering. So please make sure you check out our release notes and the blog. I will paste the link in the chat. So without further ado, I'm very excited for today's community office hours where we have Trino and Delta Lake meet. So we have Brian, Claudius, and Tom from Trino, and Denny and myself from Delta Lake. So Brian, why don't you go ahead and give a little introduction about yourself?
Okay, well, thanks, Vini, and thanks for having us here. I am Brian Olson. I am a developer advocate at Starburst. We're the vendor company that builds around Trino and does a lot of contributions in the open source side as well. And so I've been working with Trino for, I don't know, 5 years now, and back when it was called Presto, and so we really enjoyed the product. Really liked a lot of what it had. So I started getting a little more involved in the community, started contributing a little bit myself on the Elasticsearch connector in particular, and then after that, one thing led to another, and now I'm talking about this cool query engine nonstop, and getting to hang out with cool people like Denny and Vini, and obviously Tom and Claudius. So
you forgot to mention playing guitar, right, while talking.
Yeah, I play. I fiddle around with the guitar.
That's awesome. Thank you, Brian. How about you, Claudius?
Hi, yeah. So I'm one of the product managers here at Starburst, and I'm really excited because I'm one of the PMs specifically for Trino. So we have a lot of proprietary Starburst code. Some of that's getting contributed to Trino, and we're building a lot directly in Trino so that everyone can take advantage of it, which is just a great combination with the contributions that Databricks is doing to Delta Lake, because as you saw in, I don't know if the people call it the Trino community broadcast a while back, you could use Trino and open source technologies like Delta Lake and MinIO and just start using a lakehouse and get started right away. So it's really exciting.
That's awesome, Claudius. I loved your journey. So Tom, why don't you go next?
All right, my name is Tom Nast, Director of Customer Solutions here at Starburst. I used to work with Denny and Vini. It seems like 30 years ago, so it's been a long time. But
don't date ourselves, man. Don't date ourselves.
Yeah. Now, one of the first things I did at Starburst was just push Delta Lake, because I was pretty excited about it when I worked at Databricks, and I wanted to make sure that it gets adopted more. I went through the pains of building out a large Hadoop clusters, and I came from a database world. So when I got into, I couldn't do updates, deletes, and all the headaches I did. I just wanted to run the other way. So I was very excited to learn about Delta Lake, and hopefully I influenced it here, and we open sourced it recently. So just the more the better on something like this with the technology. The more people we get around using it, it's better for everybody. So
Yeah, and Tom, it was great working on the healthcare customers. When our product had still like a long ways to go. And yeah, it was just an amazing ride. So look at where we are now, right?
No,
Amazing communities.
and I'm still in my basement, which is weird.
I think you cling too tightly to the basement, Tom.
I know. I need to get out more into Boston, but it's on the agenda. It's nice out now in New Hampshire.
Exactly.
Yeah, get some sun and air, dude. Seriously, man.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Denny, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you very much. Hey, everybody. Name's Denny Li. I've been working with Apache Spark and more importantly, Delta Lake since its inception. And longtime database guy, just like Tom. So that's why Tom and I know each other. Super happy to working with the Trino folks. When I was in my realm of database, in the database world, I actually was working on BI with analysis services world too. So the fact that we got Trino and Delta Lake together, that super excites me. So glad that we finally got the session together. We've known each other for a while, yet it took us 3 years for us to finally actually get on air together. So we're a little behind schedule on that one, but otherwise than that, super happy.
Yeah, finally we are together. So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. So like Denny, I'm also a developer advocate working on advocacy efforts for Delta Lake community. And, I have been with Delta Lake project since its inception as well, and have seen a lot of implementation as well as use cases with the customers working on features from like a journey of 4 years, I guess. So that's exciting. That's why I love talking to all the Delta enthusiasts and the community ecosystem who works with Delta. So, all right. So it looks like we have people from all over the globe, which is awesome. One of the questions I will start with is, we just released the Delta and Trino connector. So why don't we give audience a quick rundown of what this feature is meant to be and what problem does it solve? I will leave it open, whoever wants to answer.
All right, maybe I'll start with this.
I was gonna say, Claudius, take that one.
I'll leave that to Claudius.
So the problem that we were solving was already solved for enterprise customers, right? We'd had a Delta Lake connector that did reads and writes, and we'd been adding optimization capabilities. And the problem is that Trino customers just didn't have this at all, right? So their options around Delta Lake were not, right? So why did people want Delta Lake, right? So the people have been using Hive since day one, and there were, a lot of advantages, right? Scale, and Trino could make a lot of that access significantly faster by parallelizing it. But these benefits of these lake houses, having these flexible schemas and having this enormous scale are great, but people still need ACID, right? It turns out that saying, hey, can we just ignore ACID for a while? Sort of, but it's really hard. It makes your entire life more difficult. So you can use Delta Lake. You can do consistent updates and row level inserts and deletes and just treat it like a regular database.
Yeah, and I think to jump on that too, we've hit this inflection point with a lot of our customers in the last probably year, and they're getting these very, very, very large tables with hundreds of thousands of partitions, and a lot of that data is statistics and partition information. All that stuff is stored in the Hive Metastore, and if you're on AWS, you're using Glue. And we've hit the wall on performance in a lot of these customers because they're trying to, we could either cache that metadata, but they're using maybe Spark or another process to add files or add partitions. So you have a cache, but you have to invalidate that cache. So we've struggled lately because that is like the single point of failure or the single node that is really causing performance issues for a lot of our customers. So we encourage them to get to Delta Lake because, as you may know, majority of all that data is not stored in the Hive Metastore now. All that data is stored in the file system that could be read in parallel. So we're seeing, we're solving a lot of problems, not only just on the DML side, but actually performance issues with a lot of our customers, because they've grown from smaller tables to these huge, humongous tables, and nobody's ever deleting data. So I think that's another one that I think people don't really understand, is the performance benefits of Delta Lake.
Particularly that list file listing. You were talking about it as well, Denny, like in the Cinco de Trino talk. Like that's just something that immediately brings any of your queries to a screeching halt, if not just totally like doesn't run. One thing I wanted to point out, and I believe there was a way that we had like people in the Trino community before we had the official connector. There was kind of like a hacky way to take the Hive connector, and like you had to basically kind of do some behind the scenes operations. I did want to kind of mention, like, we had a lot of people doing this hack because we had just such a huge demand, because they're like, hey, like we're for instance, we're on a Databricks setup, and like we want to use Trino for the interactive stuff, but like we have no way to do this. So our initial, I think, Tom, you wrote a blog on this, was kind of like how to kind of put this together somewhat, without having an official connector that actually interfaces with Delta Lake. And so that was a big, I think, for a couple of years, just kind of like we didn't have a really good way to solve that for the open source community. And so that's another big thing. Like for a lot of those people that are maybe hearing this for the first time, like there's an official connector now. You don't have to use the Hive connector and that funky vacuum hack turnaround thing. So, I don't know.
Just to add exactly what Brian is talking about, there was the other hack too, which was the manifest file, right? So basically you generate the manifest file, and sure, you could auto update and auto regenerate that manifest file. But if you were even remotely in a scenario where you were like, even if it's just batch processing, let alone stream processing, right? Where you're making constant modifications, inserts or whatever's to the data, the idea of constantly modifying that manifest file, it was never going to survive. And just like, what Tom was calling out, like if you've got even moderately sized tables, let alone the massive ones, let alone you're trying to keep all of history, right? The reality is that that's a massive amount of data that, just like what Brian called out, like the fact that you're doing Cloud Object Store file listing, that takes forever, right? Assuming it even works at all. And so basically the hacks and the manifest file were not really good situations. So these are good temporary hacks, but this is where the community, both our Trino and Delta Lake communities work together to basically go ahead and say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and actually make this work. So hats off to the Starburst folks, by the way. I want to give seriously hats off to them, that they went ahead and did the vast majority of the work. So I want to call them out, right? That to go ahead and get this through. Obviously, we're working closely together. We're friendly, as you can tell. So we're going to keep working together to advance and get all additional features in. And so one of the things that we definitely want to ask anybody, whether it's on this call or for that matter, if you want to go ahead and ping us on either the Trino Slacks or the Delta Lake Slacks, just go ahead and let us know. Right? What other features do you want in? What other things that are potentially missing or advancements that you would like to see? Because we'd love to engage with the community to see what else we should be doing. We have a plan that we're currently working on, which we'll publish shortly. But again, we always want to engage with y'all in terms of how what else we can go do. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, definitely. But Denny, there is one question on you talked about the manifest files. So what are these files? How are they generated? For those who are new. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yes. To generate a manifest file, basically there is a generate manifest command. I don't happen to remember the syntax off the top of my head, but basically there's a generate manifest syntax. What the manifest is basically a single file that lists all of the Parquet files that make up your Delta table. Okay, that's basically what it means. So in other words, when you wanted Trino or any other system that wasn't basically already natively working with Delta Lake, what it could do is just basically read that manifest file to figure out what was going on. Okay, here are the files you need, and then you're good to go. The problem, of course, is that if you're modifying, updating, inserting, deleting data, which is pretty common in a data lake last time I checked, right? If you're going to go ahead and constantly do those modifications, right? That means you have to constantly regenerate that manifest file. Now, there is the auto manifest generation after the first time you do it that actually takes care of that for you. But that's only if you're doing very slow modifications, like modifications on a very infrequent basis. And in almost any data lake, that's not the primary mode of operation anymore. Like, if you had asked that question to me 10 years ago, sure, maybe. Now, definitely not. So.
Awesome. So, Denny, does this manifest file also have the information about the statistics and all those things that are used for?
No, none of the good
right?
stuff. None of the good stuff. It literally is just a manifest that says, here are all the Parquet files that make up the table at that point in time. That's it. That's all it has.
Got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So there's a following question on that. How difficult is it to migrate from using Hive connector to query Symlink manifest Hive tables to using Delta connector?
That's a Trino question. Very, very easy. You would just convert those tables to Delta tables, and then you would just interact with them as usual. So you could do like a create table as with the Delta connector, and then just say select star from that table. That's the quickest way of doing it. And then you would just treat it as a regular table, regular Delta like table.
Yeah, essentially you just make a copy of that table you have. You're essentially simultaneously writing maybe to both while you're doing the migration. And then once you've checked that, like, everything's pretty much the same, you're getting the same like checksums out of both of those tables, then you can essentially switch over and start treating the Delta table at that point as your primary table.
Yeah, I think this gets to a good point that a lot of you have been addressing, that sometimes the question isn't really, can you do X? Because with software, usually the answer is, yeah, if you want to work at it hard enough, right? Like you can always, hack something together and maybe it works well or maybe it works not so well. Often the more relevant question is, how easily can you do this and how well does it work, right? So with having a lot of increasing amounts of Delta Lake in open source, and with having the Delta Lake connector in open source and having these work together and having all the code base be visible and adding a lot of these functions, in some cases doesn't unlock something that you couldn't do. It just makes it much, much easier and makes it work much better. So
that's a very good point, Claudius, because all of these new systems are built on the foundation of open source. And for us to like really advance and solve all the data engineering problems, it's required that we all work together and form like a community, right? So that systems are simplified and easier for use for end users. So thank you for adding that information, Claudius. So our next question is, how do we stop implicit conversion of input data to custom Trino UDFs? Is that a question?
Yeah.
That you can answer, Brent? Yeah.
So, I mean, is this specifically saying like, is there a way to essentially turn off the UDF functionality in Trino so that you're basically not relying on any system specific conversions? I think if that's how I'm understanding the question. And like, I mean, essentially this would come down to like, there's no way to be like, no, you like turn off UDFs or basically stop any of these kind of conversions in any query engine, really, right? It's actually opening up, kind of helping you out with like trying to solve various edge cases. One of the strengths actually around Trino, I would say, is that you can kind of write your own UDFs, write your own plugins, and add that to the system. And that usually kind of gets around some of the edge cases where that are difficult to solve with like just pure SQL. Yeah, there's not like a way to kind of stop it. So in terms of like, if you're thinking about how do I maintain, I think the broader question would be like, how do I keep myself from kind of getting stuck into one solution and being able to just kind of stay purely on SQL, so that let's say I want to move from, Trino or Spark, and I'm kind of maybe even analyzing both of those, right? Like, I want to keep to closest as SQL as possible. I think that's kind of where the question is. And so that's really going to come down to you as the implementer, and maybe locking down, who actually writes that SQL, how that actually gets generated and makes it there. And then, having a very tight control over, what can be used, what can't be used. If you're trying to kind of keep that more specifically focus on just following the SQL standard. I'm hoping that's what the question was. I kind of tried to read through the lines.
At least somebody appreciated that answer, Brian. So somebody said this is so cool. I need to do this at my company. So that gives you a validation.
Well, good. Yeah,
Awesome.
it's not an easy question to ask. It's more of a governance problem.
Yeah. So on that, Brian, right? You mentioned some of the highlights of Trino. What are other shiny features where which Trino solves? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the most obvious things that come to people's mind is the first thing is interactive, right? Like a lot of times when it comes down to I'm trying to just do a quick scan over this data, trying to kind of let's think through the data analyst or BI situation where you're running, these queries that over this, petabyte scale data, and you're trying to you really only care about maybe one customer out of all of that, right? And so maybe that only would return a terabyte, and then you have a couple predicates that would ultimately filter the data down to maybe a couple gig or something like that. And so what Trino is really good at doing is it's actually really good at making very optimal query plans to avoid a lot of extra work, a lot of and do a lot of this stuff in a pipelined parallel fashion, so that the results come back blazingly fast. Traditionally, we've really kind of avoided fault tolerance in the name of let's avoid making any kind of extra work for us, so that we can just get the answer back as quickly as possible. And if something does fail, it's so quick that you can just rerun it. So that encompasses a whole workload of interactive analytics that we like to call it. And interactive analytics would definitely be the one kind of thing that people know Trino and Presto for. And so that's definitely, kind of up there. The other thing that we're very well known for is query federation, which is when you have, let's say, data that is sitting in Elasticsearch, for instance, or you have data sitting in a real-time database like Pinot or something like that. And you want to be able to ask questions or run a machine learning algorithm over all these systems. And you don't want to, let's say in the real-time situation, you want to be able to get that answer back really fast, or even get the union of, let's say your historical data sitting in Delta Lake, and then your real-time data coming in through Apache Pinot. You want kind of a union of both of those data sets to just spit out somewhere, and then maybe analyze in a different table, or even just analyze on the fly. So this Trino allows you to be able to do this query federation super easy. It becomes this very easy way to kind of not only query the data ad hoc, being able to from multiple places, but you can also, as kind of Tom mentioned before, do what, a CTAS query, create table as, and just quickly pull from one data source and then move it into another. So let's say, you want to, the downstream, or the time that it takes all of your real-time data to make it into Delta Lake is a little bit longer for your, let's say, batch pipeline. So you want to actually have one process that brings it in a little earlier, so that you can do some faster query analytics over Delta Lake. And so that would be one option where you can actually do select from this real-time data store, or a near real-time, maybe with Elasticsearch, and put it into my data lake, so that I can start doing further analytics. Those are a couple kind of the broad spectrums of why people really like Trino alongside a lot of these other query engines.
So Brian, before we close that question, there's a question related to that. Doesn't this mean, you mentioned about CTAS, right? So doesn't that mean we will have data in silo or redundant, since we are using CTAS?
So could you repeat the question one more time?
Doesn't CTAS mean that they will have to have data in either silo or redundant fashion if we are using CTAS for Trino and Delta?
Would the data be siloed essentially beforehand, is that the kind of idea? Yeah. So this is kind of giving you the option to kind of push the ETL job down, kind of kick the can down. Essentially, you're saying like, I'm going to keep, I'm not sure if this is something that I need to do at full scale, right? I'm just kind of analyzing and looking over my data right now. And I essentially do not necessarily need to do ETL right now or some big batch job. I just want to kind of like pull data from this location and pull data from that location before I actually, and it gives you this option of like, I could just ad hoc pull data from both of these siloed locations, right? These kind of, people say data silos, but you could also call that a data mesh nowadays, So essentially I have data in all these different locations, right? And it's all, everybody's kind of doing their own thing. Cause this is kind of like what we get the giant spaghetti monster where everybody's got like their own data solution. And so what's nice about Trino from a query federation standpoint is that I can, as an analyst now, I don't have to like say, okay, let me go out to this team and have a meeting with their team leader. I don't have to go out to another team and this other team here to like meet with all their team leads before I can actually get them to agree that we're going to run this big giant ETL process and put all this stress on their servers and then get everything into one location. Here, I can actually just do a quick swipe around, like as an analyst, I could just immediately go, hey, I'm going to connect to your data server. I'm going to connect to your data server. I'm going to connect to your data server. And now I can actually just interactively run queries. That's not going to stress out either of those servers. It's just going to be these kind of small push down queries that that does get executed on them, but it's like smaller tidbits of queries. And then anything that can't get pushed down, it gets streamed into Trino, and then Trino basically does the rest of the processing and slicing, right? So that's kind of like, everybody, like silos, especially through like acquisitions and everything, like data siloing and data kind of like, separation. This is why we're talking about things like data mesh these days, because it's like, it's a problem that most people are just in, and they're always trying to move towards some sort of a centralized thing, but it's always going to be somewhat centralized, somewhat decentralized. And so having that ability to kind of like flex around that, where you do have these certain processes that should happen constantly, that's when you do ETL. And then you have these ones where you're more interactive, you're trying to discover, you don't want to have to do ETL every single time. Right. You want to bring all those into one spot. So that's one of the really very common use cases of Trino.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So we are only 5 minutes, we only have 5 minutes left, but there are so many questions that community is asking. So I'll just take one or two more questions. Next question is there any Trino plus Delta Lake performance benchmark available and case studies that we can refer? So we can definitely share the resources, but any quick call outs that anybody would like to add?
On the topic of benchmarks in general, so yeah, there are TCP benchmarks and so on. I would generally encourage people to say, what's your data set and your query pattern? Because that's what's actually going to matter. And there's just so much difference with any performance benchmarks. Like if you change what the data is or how you access it, you can make any engine look good or terrible, right? So
yeah, and I definitely want to concur with Claudius on this one. It's like, yeah, you can run it on TPCDS if you want some form of standardization. That's fine, I guess, right? But the reality is anything, like any modifications to the data depends on, are you running this on AWS? Are you running this MinIO? Are you running, like, there are all these variables that are going to come into play that are going to change everything. So I'm just going like, nah, I'm with Claudius on this one. Like really test it out with what you have. And don't forget, Brian also has his, actually, can we repost Brian's blog? Like he actually has a blog about how benchmarking is actually bad. So Brian, why don't you chime in since you wrote the blog?
I have a couple opinions on this. Yeah.
Yeah. You have a little bit, right? You have a small opinion on this, correct? If I recall correct. Yeah,
I just get really frustrated, right? Like being an engineer that's trying to figure out like top from bottom and what's a good, where do I get started? Every single time you go to any vendor site, or even like OS sites now are starting to even get into this practice a little bit. And it's kind of sucks, is that like, you go there and like, what do you expect to see? Benchmark that shows the whatever vendor you're at, that's just like shows a ridiculous, like weirdly comparison. You're like, what did they do to get that benchmark? You know what I mean? Like that's the question you need to ask. And so like my current approach and my way that I like to kind of work with the community is like, I actually want them to help, like I want to help them figure out how to create a benchmark, ideally for cheap, because I know like not all the time your boss is like really up to letting you spend a whole bunch of money on benchmarking. It'd be nice if you just had a never ending budget. I understand that. So like my hope is that I'm actually working now on some resources too, where like, how do we enable the community to just run their own benchmarks on their own data with their own data shapes on the specific systems that they're using? Like it's always going, like the answer is always, it depends, right? And so benchmarks don't really say anything except for, it's literally just technical peacocking. And so like, so that's really all it comes down to. I wouldn't trust too many like benchmarks too much, right? And there's obviously third parties that maybe do a better job and try to be as unbiased as possible. Maybe take some heat into those. I mean, I'm not saying it's not worthwhile, but anyways, you should do your own, ideally try to do your own benchmarks, or get a group of your friends or local businesses that try to get together and do a benchmark together and help analyze like stuff. It's so silly, these games we play. Anyways.
I would love, like, the sort of the holy grail of benchmarking is, can we devise a benchmark that you can show to anyone and they would say, oh yes, this perfectly models my data.
Yeah,
exactly. From everyone, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We completely can do that. No problem at all. I mean, everybody's data is exactly the same, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
So, I don't want to say it's like we can, and I think there is a lot of good work to say, can we come up with benchmarks that will at least give you some idea? Right.
I would say no, because I would say my opinion is
right?
You just need to train people. You just need to help people out and help them with cost-effective ways. And you could do that a lot with the cloud these days, right? And maybe you just have a benchmarking fest where you just get together with a bunch of your friends. Like open source benchmarking is basically, hashtag open source benchmarking. Let's make it happen now.
Yes. Oh my God. There's
all right. We are at the top of the hour. We are at the top of the hour. Vinny, I believe there's one more question. I know the person was joking. Okay.
Yeah, but I do want to make a quick call out. This has been very amazing session, and there are a lot of questions that we didn't get through. So why don't we do another session, maybe a tech talk or something? So please stay tuned for that. That's where we can have, Brian do put on the rabbit hat with electric guitar at the same time. Because that was the question, Brian, for you. That you ever play, do you ever put a rabbit hat and play the guitar at the same time?
Oh, I will share that with you guys to share with the rest of the community. I have a couple videos of that. So go to the Trino YouTube. Go to the Trino YouTube. It is actually the front thing of me literally playing Margaritaville, but a parody of it in the Trino bunny hat. So go check out the Trino YouTube and please subscribe.
Okay.
So Brian, you did one part of it, right?
I'm going to play the drums. Okay.
Okay.
I'm joining you for Margaritaville.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm all about it, man. Let's do it.
Bam.
That would be super fun. Yeah, we already saw one part of it. Now we will do the full.
Yeah, go to YouTube, look up Trino, and please subscribe.
Awesome. So last quick call out. I did share the resources of Trino and Delta community for you to join the Slack channels and ask away questions, because I see that there are amazing questions which our data engineering journey goes through. So a quick call out, we have amazing Delta sessions, developer lounge, and community events. We will also have Delta contributors from Delta ecosystem at our summit in June. So I shared a blog if you want to check out who is coming, because I'm pretty sure you will love who the people are who are doing keynote, and there are amazing sessions for Delta Lake as well. And I also shared a link to register. So hopefully that's helpful. So with that, if you don't have any more thoughts, and since our time is running out, let's call it.
Great. Thanks for having us again.
Next time.
Yes, for sure.
Yes.
Definitely. Margaritaville. We got to do it.
Yeah, totally.
Bam.
Awesome.
Right,
thank you all.
everybody.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
was fun.
Thank you so much.